Welcome, councillors, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, and we have a couple of councillors online, I believe. If Una, if you just can confirm that.
Yes, we do. We have Councillor Wang and Councillor Brown online.
And the councillors sitting, you're welcome to come and sit at the table if you so choose, so over to you guys. Okay, just noting that this meeting is live streamed, and if we could turn off our mobile phones so we don't get interrupted. And at this point, in terms of the opening karakia, I'd invite Councillor Barker to do that for us.
Thank you, Chair. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I raro, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I waho, kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, hunie, huie, tā kie.
Ka pai, thank you. Okay, apologies, I call for apologies. Are there any apologies, Anna?
No.
Okay, so there's no apologies, so there's no need to accept that. We can move on. Just in terms of declarations of interest, that's in our papers. Just looking for confirmation, are there any changes with respect to the declarations of interest? Councillor Kaihong?
Chair, I had a question around the declarations of interest which I was waiting for clarification on, and that was around what has recently happened with Michael Wood and the Auckland City Councillor around holdings in private companies. Are they required to be disclosed individually?
I'll seek advice from the CE on that.
That hasn't been clarified, because I think there are quite a few of us that have previously filled in a declaration which is referred to, for example, an interest in a family trust, or but have not specifically listed individual company shareholdings.
Sorry, Una, that should be declared? Should be. Of all investments in all public companies?
And including those held via family trusts? Because that was the issue.
Let's go away and take advice on that.
The Auckland City Council Auckland Airport share sale.
Yeah, let's get advice offline on that, and we'll confirm that with members, yeah? Okay?
So my form has not been completed as yet, pending that advice.
Thank you. Any other questions with respect to the declaration? Okay. If not, the next item is urgent items on the agenda. There's one item that I've just asked for, is an update from Thomas Cole with respect to the annual report and audit situation, just in terms of finalisation of that. Thomas, can you update us on that, please?
Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. So some of you will recall at the Council meeting that the annual report has left on the table due to some late changes. Those changes were provided to Audit New Zealand, but unfortunately the file that we updated was the incorrect file, so they haven't been able to turn those queries around. As of about 5 minutes ago, we're just in the process of making those final changes again and sending them the file, and talking to Leon, the Audit Director. They'll be in a position pretty quick as soon as they've received that to turn it around and give clearance.
So thanks, Tom. It sounds like we're very much in the home straight, and we'll have on our next meeting basically the auditors in attendance in terms of the management report, and also be discussing the sort of audit arrangements for 2023.
Correct, yes.
Yep, cool. Thanks, Thomas. Any questions for Thomas with respect to that? No? Thank you. Any other urgent items? Councillor Barker?
Sorry, Chair, this is not an urgent item, but I just wanted to go back to the interest register.
Oh, yes.
I too will need to register some interests, shareholdings.
Yep.
And not on that list.
Yep. No, that's cool. So we'll get the advice, and then councillors can respond accordingly. Okay. So now just confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of 27 July 2022. So I'm just looking for a mover and seconder to confirm those minutes. I'm not sure who was in attendance.
I was present.
Yes.
Was there any member that is re-elected who was present? But I am happy to confirm that it is true and correct.
Okay, so thank you, Mayor Tapsell. So in that respect, Una, do we need a seconder given that nobody else is there?
We will need a seconder.
Yep. Okay. Okay, Councillor Rory. Thank you. All in favour? we'll take that as confirmed. Okay, so now let's move to the staff reports. I just want to note that as part of our run sheet meeting in preparation for today's meeting yesterday, discussed with management, and two of the items that are in our papers is confidential, the update on phase 2, the One Council project and the risk review. Those items will be taken in open, so we'll discuss those matters in open, and we'll deal with those shortly. But the first item to discuss is 6.1, the Audit and Risk Committee draft work programme, and just ask for a mover and seconder to receive that report. Councillor Lowry and Councillor Barker. So put that motion that we receive the report. Please say aye. Aye. So we'll take that as confirmed. Thomas, I invite you to give us an overview of that report.
Thank you, Chair. So what we've put together, councillors, is a draft work program for the next 12 months. The July workstream obviously reflects the items that are on the agenda for today, and what I have got here is a draft proposal with regards to some of the actions that we can talk about and cover in coming meetings. If I just work through some of the sections of this report, you'll see there at the top, obviously, the risk management activity stream. So you have got the risk report, which you'll have shortly. And what I am suggesting to the committee is a deep dive on 3 items that are probably topical at the moment. And no doubt, once we've had a chance to go more in depth in the risk, through the risk framework, more may fall out. And what we're suggesting on doing is you'll have a brief update on the One Council project today. We are intending to do a post-implementation review 3 months after go-live, which is scheduled to start that review in September, and we'll be in a position to provide you with a more thorough post-implementation review. We've been planning to do a post-implementation review on the Performing Arts Centre seismic strengthening, so we'll be in a position to give that to you as well. And with regards to cyber risk as well into the future around how we are managing that, continuing to manage that, what improvements we have on the way, and to give you some confidence around that. I do expect those risk deep dives to expand out, as no doubt as more items appear on other council committee agendas that you may want to dive into, and also anything that may fall out of the risk reports that you will get in on a regular basis. The next set is probably the policy and framework reviews. Internally, we have got a small team working on the current revision of all our policies, and in particular, are they fit for purpose? Are they being adhered to? And those sorts of items. And so what we have got here is a list of probably more of the important ones to bring to. In particular, coming up, we are revising our procurement policies. We're in the process of revising those, and we'll be in a position in September to walk you through how that policy has changed and what the implications are. And with regards to the discussions that we've been having with the museum, in particular topical with regards to our debt, we do have PricewaterhouseCoopers that are our Treasury advisors and advise us on our strategies, and we'll be looking to ask them to come at the November meeting or earlier if you wish to present how we manage our debt and the risks associated with that, and to get that third-party independent review. Next tranche, third-party independent review. Next tranche is the insurance program. So we are about to commence the annual renewal of our insurance program, which is quite a comprehensive program covering many policies that range from public liability through to material damage cover, covering upwards of $1.8 billion worth of assets. That is done through the BOPLAS, through Aon, who are our broker. And we should be in a position to give you an update of what those policies look like, what are some key considerations that we've taken into account with regards to what is being insured or not, and how, and coming up to that annual renewal at the end of October. And we'll look to do that in the September and November period. And then just further down, one of the other key projects is the long-term plan. Erna and the team, we're well underway with regards to planning the the workshops and particularly the processes of putting our long-term plan together, and we'll be in a position in September to give the Audit and Risk an overview of what that program looks like, what the risks are associated with that, what the issues are that we're tackling, and how we're going to go through that process. And then there's some other normal ones with regards to the external audit, dealing with the audit arrangement letters and so forth. What I have got is a list of things at the bottom too to be confirmed. If there is a desire and a wish to do those, then we will look to program those in, but in particular as well, just opening it up for a wider debate and to see what else falls out, so we can look to add things onto the schedule, and I'm happy to work with our chair with regards to amending the program, should you wish. So with that, over to you, Chair.
No, thanks, Tom. So I'll just kick off before I just take questions. So a couple of things to add. One is around emergency management, just with respect to emergency management preparedness and perhaps reports coming through from, is it the CDMG, to give confidence to the committee in terms of what's happening in that space. In terms of internal audit, I would like to put the ball in Council's court to talk about developing and funding an internal audit program. It would be my expectation that an organisation this size does have a committed budget for internal audit, whether that's funded in terms of an internal resource or outsourced is a discussion, but at the moment, as I understand it, there's no budget set aside, so we can't obviously make a decision today, but I'd be really keen that that's a discussion point that Council takes on board. And maybe in terms of two other aspects to this program, certainly from risk, and perhaps we'll talk about it in more detail when we get to the risk report, very keen that this committee has visibility of the key organisation strategic risks, so that's the top 10 or 12 strategic risks in terms of what they are, what the mitigations are, and that there's good understanding around that, and that in addition to the items that Thomas has identified, which is really good, we have deep dives in those, that we actually start working our way through those key strategic risks and having deep dives into them. Whether or not that is at a separate workshop or as part of this is something that we can discuss. And the other point I was going to make is in terms of key projects, you've identified the LTP. If I look at your existing LTP, there's a handful of key strategic projects that Council has identified. So again, perhaps we should have visibility on that. So that's some items that I would just like to add for discussion, that we think about how we might factor that into the work program. Bearing in mind, we've got to just ensure that the staff have got the capacity to deliver on that and we don't overwhelm. So that's sort of the items that I wanted to raise, but happy to take other questions or comments from around the committee. Deputy Mayor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question around the delegations. Does that include the financial delegations to staff? And if so, could that potentially be brought forward, given that I'm not sure, are we still operating under the, I know you said you were going to change procurement, but are we still operating under the model where we're trying to ensure that you're across all of the outgoing expenditure?
There is no intention to lift the overall financial delegations of officers, but there is an intention to change some of our procurement practices with regards to the ability to go more directly towards preferred suppliers and changing the thresholds. And with regards to those thresholds of when you can get quotes versus formal RFP processes and when you can go to preferred suppliers, we are trying to align ourselves more with the Waikato Lakes Councils with regards to the thresholds that they've set. So that's the intent of the policy. With regards to the question that you had, at the moment I am still continuing to continue on with the process that we put in place towards the end of last financial year with regards to final approval across our expenditure. That still means our staff and officers have financial delegation and they are able to engage contractors. What it just does mean at the moment is they need my approval before they can go and do that. I have been in discussion with our finance director. We did that with regards to managing the financial outcome of the previous financial year. We've had some interesting learnings and observations from that, and I'll be working with David, our finance director, with regards to sharing of that process, just with a view of improving our procurement practices going forward.
Does that satisfy your question?
Chair, I suppose the question just around the financial delegations was to know what was potentially coming up, which had been perhaps authorised by staff members previously, which not everyone was aware of, and if I could use the example of a recent sporting event.
Yep, so through the Chair, those sort of items is what we've looked to cover off, and is more with the ongoing reporting that we've put into the other committees with regards to awareness of what the organisation is doing and engaging in. And it was the understanding that that process would give the councillors more understanding of those issues. Because in that circumstances of that event that you're referring to, was well within the financial delegations that were set, but obviously it had implications with regards to the crossover of the councils and an understanding of what was underway with regards to the timing of the elections, etc.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just go back to my first question was, should the question of financial delegations be brought forward rather than being left out till next year?
Yes, so that's what you're asking for, to bring that from March 24 to an earlier meeting. So, Thomas, did you indicate that there's work happening with respect to review of that policy? So that's why it's sitting at March rather than bringing it forward earlier?
That is correct. We're currently working on that and putting a new draft together for implementation, yes.
Just want to check that that satisfies the councillors, whether or not you're happy to wait till March, or you prefer to ask staff to escalate that to bring that earlier. It comes down to capacity.
I understand the issue that the Deputy Chair is raising, and it might be, well, I'll take this discussion offline with regards to seeing as to explaining the two and seeing as to whether it resolves the issue that she has. If the committee wishes, we can bring forward that financial delegations, and that was again one of the purposes of this discussion, to see if that was.
So perhaps we bring that forward to November. Would that work for you, Thomas? Can you get any nods?
Yes.
Mayor Tatzel?
Thank you. I do have a question after that, just around that discussion. I would certainly support it, and I think the issue that we do have is we have a very new council. However, the organisation in many ways is still operating based on what has been set previously, what has been approved previously, and certainly what the priorities were previously. We now have a new set of priorities, and so we would like to see those come through and be prioritised within the work stream specifically too. The question that I did have, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, is just around, obviously the museum is one of the most significant infrastructure projects, that bathhouse building that this council will invest in, or will need to invest in one way or another. Just not sure how that fits into here. I can see the risk deep dives in Shimpak as an example, but not sure how we will manage the risk around that, given there is a significant amount of financial risk, but also reputational risk if the project doesn't go well.
Thomas, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so we are currently, we've just completed the 4 workshops with the councillors where we've explored that. The intention of those workshops was to do those deep dives into each of those individual risks with regards to the construction contract, the funding, the debt, etc. We believe that those risks have been adequately covered within those workshops. However, it is up to the council as to whether there is additional information required, but the intention is, following on from those workshops, to wrap that up into a decision-making paper that will go through to council next month. So,
and if I could add, like my point before around where we've got key project updates, I would expect when I said that we should add to this list that the museum would be top of that list, so that we would have a handful of what we perceive as key strategic projects that we have visibility at this committee, particularly with respect to the risk management aspect of those projects. Yeah.
I totally agree.
That satisfies your question? Yeah. Are there other questions around the table with respect to the work plan? Councillor Wairau.
Thank you. Just around the list of TBCs here, is there a reason in particular, tax compliance place, is there a reason why we haven't firmed that up yet?
It's one of those ones where the Chair mentioned funding available for an internal audit program. So these things generally you do engage one of the big four firms or one of the local firms to undertake a compliance audit. They do take time and are costly. It is something that we've done historically in the past on an ad hoc basis, and the last one we did do was around our payroll remediation. Some of you will recall that, where we brought in external advice and went through that process. And so those are sort of tied to more developing an internal program, resourcing it correctly, and then what are those items that would fall onto that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So that reinforces, I guess, my point before that I think asking Council to work with the CE to identify a budget to fund those sorts of work programs, because that's a key part in terms of our risk mitigation and management of areas to give confidence that the stewardship's in place. Can I...
Sorry, I apologise, Mr Chair, because I must have misheard your question on your call at all when you started. So.
I probably didn't clear that I meant to cover that as well, but that's good discussion. Okay, so if there's no further questions... Sorry, my apologies.
I'm going to raise this probably because Councillor Patterson will probably raise it were he here. At the recent LGNZ Zone 2 meeting, they did discuss insurances and the need for councils to actually look fully at their portfolio of buildings as to whether or not you should effectively self-insure for some of those. So will that be part of that work program in terms of the insurance updates?
Yes, so part of that is we will be giving you the detail of the what is being insured and the judgment calls around that. So yes, bearing in mind that we do work with Aon New Zealand, obviously part of Aon International, who are our advisors in the insurance space, and so we are generally led by them with regards to their advice on what is appropriate or not to insure, and we can take the committee through some of those judgments and how they've arrived at those sorts of elements. In particular, Aon do hold a roadshow, I think, once a year, and do invite audit and risk members from member councils to participate. And so when that one comes up in the coming year, you'll get an invite to that and get an understanding of how they help us manage our insurance risk.
Thank you, Thomas. In fact, it was Aon that ran that workshop at the LGNZ conference. So I know that Councillor Patterson has already asked that a couple of times, so I thought I'd ask it on his behalf today.
Thanks, Thomas. So if there's no other questions, we'll take the audit plan confirmed apart from the changes and items that have been discussed. Do we need another resolution to confirm that, or we're happy to move on? So the next item is 6.2, which is committee discussion on the deputy chair recruitment. I'm not sure who wants to lead off on that in terms of where we're at. Thomas? Yep.
So thank you, Chair. Councillors and Chair, we obviously have a independent chair. We have a vacancy with regards to our deputy chair, which we have not filled. The thinking at the moment was to get an understanding from the members with regards to what the strategic issues and challenges that the committee has going forward and wants to consider, and therefore what do you feel is the appropriate skill set that should complement the one that is already around the table. And with that advice, we would look to approach the directors of the Institute and find an appropriate individual with that skill set to match.
Do we have comments there? Councillor Waru.
Kia ora through you, Mr Chair, tēnā koe. How long is this process going to take?
We should be able to complete it in time for the next meeting if we can land on the skill set and there are suitable people and be able to target them and interview them in time. We should be able to get that person in place by September.
September, okay, thank you.
So my view is that we should be looking for somebody who has experience working on risk and assurance committees, and ideally in local government, given the unique nature and complexity of local government. So that would be the preference. If you look at the council, you've got some really challenging capital programs, contracts, with an internal audit program or governance structure within those projects. We can put specific skills in to manage the risks with respect to those programs, but sitting here we've got an overview of the whole organisation. So I think somebody who has experience working on audit and risk committees would be really valuable to add to the committee. So Thomas, what's suggesting is we go through the IID in terms of a advertisement process and bring back a short list for the committee to consider. Is that the plan?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. Got nods around the table in terms of supporting that process. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Open process, or are we shoulder tapping people? What's the process that we're using to identify this, given that we've previously gone out with a fairly wide skill set which included audit and risk with very little response?
My understanding from Thomas is that the proposal is to do that again, to have another round in terms of a recruitment process through IAD, which doesn't stop potentially shoulder tapping, inviting people to apply to that process. Is that correct, Thomas?
No, that's correct. And what we were hoping is to just narrow the scope a little bit. So I guess with regards to my thinking about one of the challenges that the council and the community faces ahead of itself is that obviously we do have a heavy investment into our capital works program. We've got some rather large projects coming on board and decisions in front of us. And so is there a skill set around the delivery or implementation or monitoring of the capital works program, as an example? A second one for myself is around contracts management. We do, obviously, pretty much all our capital works falls under contracts, and in addition to that, a number of our key services are delivered through contracts. And so wondered if there was an individual out there with a skill set with regards to significant experience in managing and delivering things under contracts, as to whether that would be a skill set that could complement around the table as well. And so that would be the two for me that stand out to myself. However, over to you.
I think there are nods around the table that those skill sets would certainly complement around the table. So if we have a process that looks for somebody who has experience in audit and risk governance, but specifically also has experience in those areas, then I think that would be useful to target who we're after, yeah? Does that give you enough guidance, Thomas, or...?
Yes, if the committee is happy with that.
I guess there's nods, or, yeah?
Our preference would be obviously to have someone local, but in the absence of a local with that skill set putting their hand up, we would have to look to go external.
Yeah, Tatsuo.
Thank you. So you sounds like at the exact same time. Perhaps if also before the advertisement goes out that it can be circulated to the committee for us to just double check that it accurately reflects what we're looking for, and perhaps if there is anything that we think needs to be added at that stage. However, also preference would be local, but I suppose local from a regional perspective as well. There are only so many people in Rotorua, and some of those skills are very specific, and so I would still be open-minded if it was regional or closer. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Lauru?
Just for a clarification, really. So we're saying in September we will have someone in place, or we will be making a decision about someone in September.
Thomas?
Ideally, we'd like to have this person in place, bearing in mind that there is an advertising process, there's an interviewing process, and then it's the council that makes, obviously, would need to pass the resolution to appoint. And so if all those things can fall into place in time for September, yes, but there is, due to the nature of it, it could fall into the next meeting, yes.
Thank you. And just one more question. So how long is the time that we're going to advertise?
Generally, we do 2 to 3 weeks, if not 4. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions, let's move on to the next item, which is the update on phase 2 of the One Council project. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Barker and Deputy Mayor Karpong's got a pen up, I think. Yep, cool, thank you. And so invite Suzanne Craig. So Suzanne, you're going to got a PowerPoint presentation for us to understand? No? Yes? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do. And there it is. Good afternoon, councillors. Could we just make the presentation on...
We need to share it, so it takes just...
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Alrighty. Apologies, sorry. Well, like I said, good afternoon, Council. It's a pleasure to bring this report to you today. We're really excited with, we went live on 31st of May, as indicated to you all. From a project perspective, we felt that the go live went very well. There were a number of teething issues, and I'll just take you through some of those. In terms of access and permissions, they were less than expected but easily managed. It's really difficult sometimes to apply all access and permissions to the solution before we go live because people are changing roles, new people are coming on board, and we may not quite have the permissions exactly right. So there is a process to go through to make that change. As you would expect, and we have flagged this before, is there are some data issues that we will see. If we reflect back, there's probably 20 years worth in some cases where data has been brought across that sat in legacy systems and also current systems. So ERP projects of this size and scale, you can expect to have some of those issues, and that's not uncommon. However, what I will say is that nothing is unresolvable, and the data migration team, collectively with the business areas, are working through to resolve those issues. In terms of the business uptake, we think that that's gone reasonably well as well. The business, when it says persisted when stuck, we have to remember that they're learning completely new business processes. When they walked in the door on Thursday morning after go live, their whole world has changed. So things were taking a little bit longer. They were getting some challenges in terms of how do I do this business process that I've done for the last 5 years, and it looks different. However, we have got very good support from the project team and vendors, and I'll talk about that further on. Some of the staff have felt it's been quite overwhelming, and that's because through the close down period between the two systems, we had to do some manual processing of applications, and flight applications particularly, but catching up on work that we couldn't process through that period. So the staff not only are using a new system, but they're also inputting 5 to 6 days worth of work into the new system. So we could expect things to be a little bit slower. However, we're working through that very well at the moment. So the support that we've provided the business, from the beginning, we had vendor on-site support through the go-live period. We also had staff roaming the building, and we looked at the different impacted areas. So some of our business are high impact, some are low, and some are medium. Therefore, we supported the teams with regards to what level of support that they needed. The team are on site from our vendor. We also had our BAs sitting with the business in the areas, and we also had the subject matter experts, who we refer to as the SMEs, supporting their team members. That is still going now. We're 7 weeks, nearly 8 weeks in, and we are still supporting the business that way. We are setting up a number of training sessions. We say ECM refresher, and I'm sorry, we should have written that out. Enterprise Content Management, which is our document management system. That's quite significant because that impacts all of our users. So all of the 400 odd staff, we have trained them on how to save all of their documents. We've also migrated from our existing system, which was TRIM, into the ECM. We've provided just-in-time training. Just as a clarification on that, it's very difficult to train staff 4 weeks out before going live because they often need refresher courses anyway. So we did just-in-time training for some of those critical functions: invoicing, months, year-end, rates, animal licenses, etc. We also provided a One Council Help Desk email so that we could have one point of contact for our business and one area where the project team could actually receive all of the issues or queries that were coming through. So that was the channel that we used for staff. Focus and expectations post-go live. We continue to support the business and also our portal users. And councillors, you may recall, we have worked with Infracore, with Smart Environmental and also Watchdog in terms of giving them portal access to be able to do their business within the system. What that does is also enable our business to be able to look at things in real time and live, effectively. So we're seeing things happening out in the field. We can see that. We can then deliver that to our customers in terms of giving them actual information in real time. That's gone reasonably well with our external parties as well. In terms of ensuring the business has the reporting capability, as I mentioned earlier, our data migration team have been working very hard to migrate all of the data. They will then move into supporting the business through reporting and building reporting capability. So that's where we're at in terms of the reporting aspect. Implementing changes required. We would not normally make too many changes to the solution. Again, it's going back to giving staff time to get used to a new solution and a new way of working, letting go of some of those old ways. So we don't expect to have significant changes in the first 3 months. What we will be doing is commencing a pilot very similar to what we've done with Infracore, Smart Environmental and Watchdog, and that is around a pilot for developers and architects to be able to log in and do business with us online. Obviously rates is about to go out, but we've also got a water billing process in August, and that's one of our 2 critical pieces of work. Graphs. Oh, apologies. Go back. So this is just a visual graph showing the issues that we've had since go live, and sorry, I can't read it very well, so I'll refer to my notes. The first one there is what we call our JIRAs, and they are JIRAs of the solution that we're using to raise all the issues. The second one are open tickets, and the third column there is closed tickets. So you'll see quite high over the last 5 weeks, and you'll notice that in the open area that's starting to come down, which is what you would expect. And you would also expect to see a high volume in around week 3 or week 4, because you've normally run most of your business processes day to day by then. But it's really pleasing to see that the number of closed, there's high activity in that space as well.
Suzanne, before we go over that, can I just ask, in terms of the JIRAs or the issues, is there impact or ranking of those in terms of critical, severe, high? So I guess my question is, of 109 items still open, and it's good to see them coming down, how many of those would be critical issues stopping the business doing their work sort of stuff? Like, when an issue is raised, is there any impact assessment made of them so you understand how critical the issue is to resolve?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, there is. There is a triage process that we use, and that is done on a daily basis, and we work with consultants. Anything critical is actioned immediately, and there is a time frame in which that needs to be delivered.
So going back to the previous page then, sorry to be interrupting you, in terms of the 109 still open, are there, including those 109 now we've been operating for a number of weeks, are there any which you'd call critical in terms of stopping the business doing its business?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I believe there aren't any critical stopping us from doing business. There are some ones that we need to work through. I don't have the exact numbers. I could look to the program manager, or I could come back to you if there are with the numbers. Okay,
but the key point is they are triaged and resources put into the ones that are most important to get. Okay,
100%. So what we've just identified here are the number of issues by work stream. So you can see there that we've got the analytics, the change requests, and I guess the change request that's represented as the third highest, or second highest. that's what I was referring to before. We would expect to see a number of change. However, we're not addressing those unless it is critical, and that does stop the business from functioning. But we will review all of those change requests going forward. Some of these things take a little bit longer to resolve. You can appreciate that through the testing and through all of the UAT, once you're in a live environment, issues often come up that were unknown at that time. So to the best of our ability, you're working through those as quickly and as efficiently as you can. However, you still need to unpick some things, look at the design, look at how it was configured, test processes, etc., before then being implemented. So those do take time. There are obviously the migration issues, which I did mention earlier, and also the security and the permissions.
Sorry to interrupt again, I'm being annoying.
Sure.
Just in the post-implementation review report, I'd just be keen in terms of the change requests, some assessment of how significant some of those were and the learnings with respect to that in terms of the original specification sort of design process, whether or not they could have been identified or not. But I get a sense the approach was adopt rather than adapt in terms of, hey, we've got a system, let's use the new system and change our processes as opposed to the other way. That was the philosophy behind it.
That was the philosophy.
Yeah. And with regards to the change request, we've got a process in place with regards to they're obviously being captured so far, and we're going to be reviewing them going forward. And decisions will be made as to whether a new product feature covers that, or whether it's actually a nice to have and someone just doesn't like the way to do it. And what we anticipate is probably not many of those changes will actually go through.
Yep, no, I understand the pain of staff being used to doing certain things away, and you sort of, that's understood. Sorry, carry on. Apologies.
In terms of risk and mitigations, I think they're fairly clear there. In terms of staff not fully utilising the One Council, leading to benefits not being fully realised, that's around providing continued support and training whilst we embed the solution. But it's also our leadership team ensuring that the users are using the system as they should, rather than putting any workarounds or referring back to a manual process. And that will be monitored. The issue that I raised earlier around staff being overwhelmed, I think in time, with ongoing training and monitoring of the level of competence, then we can see that risk will be mitigated. Greater investment of time and work experience in CIA release. Councillors will recall that we have found ourselves as an early adopter in some of the other products that we are implementing, or modules post-go live. We need to be really making sure that we're having the right conversations and unpicking things to ensure that any planning investment for future releases we are fully across. Any questions there?
So can I just ask, in terms of the first two risks that now you've been live for what, 6 weeks, is that about right? 7 weeks, that the assessment that those two risks are reducing?
100%,
they are reducing. And it's not listed there, but the first quarter rate strike, time, has that been done, or that's about to be done, and the assessment of how well tested, prepared we are for that? I mean,
the rate strike itself in the system did take a lot longer than normal, which is no surprise considering it was the first time doing it. So to put a bit of context to it, something that normally would take 1 to 2 hours took 11 hours. It was supported by Technology One through their consultants. And a lot of that extra time was down to obviously running new processes. We've run parallel rate strike in Ozone as well, and we've done a comparison against the two, and so we know therefore that they're very similar. And in addition to that, we've grabbed a handful of samples of different scenarios, so ratepayers that are in credit, ratepayers that pay by direct debit, ratepayers that have arrears, etc., and created a sample set. And the team have constantly checked and verified against those to make sure that it is working as intended. And yesterday the file was released to the printer to go out with regards to the rates for the 20th of August.
Okay, thanks Thomas.
It was, as you can imagine, a nervous time for us as an organisation.
Yes.
And so the team did put a lot of time and effort into double checking and triple checking to make sure it's right. And while we have the confidence that it has been right, we may, once these have been sent out, we may get a handful that may have not been quite right. And if that occurs, we'll deal with those ratepayers on a case-by-case basis.
And in terms of the data migration, that was reasonably straightforward in terms of the rating database and names of addresses and stuff from one system to the other. We've got confidence around that process.
Yes, that was, from memory, not the difficult component of the data migration. And as I said, we have kept our legacy system and the current one both up to date, and so we were able to strike the rates in both. And in addition to that, we did, I think, strike the rates in the test environment multiple times as well before doing it in the live environment. I think 3 times. So we believe we've been extra cautious and careful, but as you can understand with the scale of these projects, you do need, we're confident that we've mitigated the risk, and we'll see shortly.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Questions for Thomas or Suzanne? The only other question or comment I was going to make, just be keen in terms of the post-implementation report, that we specifically look at the benefits realisation, go back to the business case, what was proposed, and have commentary on actual benefits versus planned benefits,
and actually a good example was in the last, I think, committee meeting where my colleague JP Coston talked about the issue around that architect allegedly fraudulently signing off a certification. So for us, it was actually incredibly easy because within our new ECM, or our Enterprise Content Management System, we were actually able to type the names out, and very quickly, within seconds, we had every document within our repository that had that name involved, and so it was very easy for the team to find the properties that were affected. When compared to our old previous system, it would have been very cumbersome and time-consuming and manual. So just within the last week, we've seen a benefit, let alone many more.
Cool, thanks, Thomas. Councillor Warren, you have a question?
I'm just wondering, have you come to the end of your...
Sorry.
I'll wait till the end just in case they answer my question. Thank you.
Benefits realised to date, I mean, you're absolutely quite correct, Mr Chair, in terms of the business case and looking at the benefits realisation, but we are receiving some already in terms of mobile capability within the field. As an example, our building inspectors go out in the field and they have checklists that they go through. Prior to the go live with One Council, that's all been done manually. Now they all have laptops, and they're able to do that out in the field. We have access to the solution anytime, anywhere, on any device, and that's been a real benefit already being realised within the organisation. Other areas which are coming through as well is the manual work that we are doing in other areas as well, and that paper-driven process. When an application comes in, it should be staying completely automated right throughout the process. And we're seeing that in terms of the reduced paperwork that's coming out, the reduced scanning time that's required, and the availability to have that information within ECM straight away. In terms of future benefits, we've talked in the report around the number of releases that we are having around portals. So the first release one, we obviously have completed that or embedding that down, and you'll see the other 3 releases that we've got scheduled. In terms of the Schedule 3 release, this is where we'll get the real benefits for our community. And I would say that, a ratepayer will be able to have a registered login. They will be able to go in and see if they have an application for a building consent, if they want a limb property, if they want to have an animal. All of their interactions with council, they'll be able to see themselves. These are future releases, which we've indicated in our roadmap going forward. and there is the roadmap. What we have got there scheduled is a number of modules. We do recognise that with an LTP year planning starting for that we need to look at the sequencing of these things, but also aligning any funding to these modules that we're looking to implement. These will further enhance our One Council solution in terms of further community portals, which is what I alluded to on the previous slide, but also capital planning and delivery in terms of looking at projects from initiation through to the completion, but also aligning that with our financial system as well. Obviously, human resources and payroll, so onboarding of staff, etc. These are just highlighting high level in terms of what these modules will bring the organisation. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Questions?
Kia ora, Suzanne. Through you, Mr. Chair. If I go to the start, where did I see it? It was a quarter or there. Oh, around the teething issues. It's got access and permissions less than expected and easily managed. What do you mean by that?
For you, Mr. Chair, access and permissions in terms of the ability to do my job, I need to have access to a finance system, or I need the animal control access, and what does my profile and my role need to have access to? I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And I've just got one more. Around the roadmap, so go to the roadmap, there's 2023, 2024, 2024, 2025, 2025, 2026 projects there going there. So is that to say that by 2025 to 2026, is that when we'll fully realise 100% the benefits of this kaupapa? Because there was a lot of time and effort and investment put into this to make it happen.
Yeah. We're actually only using a fraction of the complete software package. So this takes us on a bit of a roadmap to turn on more of the functionality. The main focus for us at the moment was obviously going live on the core system and then starting to bring along a lot of those online services, so we're actually able to engage with our community and do business through that. But there are a lot of other functionality available to us and enhancements that will probably go beyond what is being shown to you. What I'll also say about the issues, and we were surprised with regards to the number of them, an ERP replacement is a massive undertaking, and it is huge. The team itself were probably nervous going into the go live and had some expectations around the things that may happen afterwards. And saying that, they probably considered a lot of things and put mitigations in place. So I'd say in my words, they probably found it a little bit anticlimactic when we didn't sort of start seeing the volume of issues that maybe some of the team were expecting. And that's a reflection of the team's time, investment, and managing that risk. We have talked to Tech One about their views of how they think we've done as well. And their comments from their people involved was they think we've done very well. And the stuff that we're seeing coming out and they're dealing with is the sort of things that they would expect. And so there's nothing, therefore, different about that. But they do believe that we've done well. It is pleasing to see that the number of issues are dropping. However, as an example today, we have had another issue come up just this morning, which I told the Mayor about earlier today, and this is sort of tied to the project, but not, and that is around the notification of a change in direct debits to ratepayers, where they pay by direct debit, that the notification wasn't received in the time frame that was required. So we have had, as an example, 4 ratepayers complain today. We've dealt with them, we've offered them the refunds with regards to the change. As an example, these were ratepayers that were paying weekly. The impact was, I think, $8 for one, $15 for another, regardless of the size. we have apologised and we have put steps in place to make that right. And there is a risk with regards to the timing of New Zealand Post and a lot of other things, that there's another tranche tomorrow that could also be impacted. But we're talking a couple of hundred out of about 12,000 ratepayers that pay by direct debit. And so the main bulk is for the 20th of August, and all those notifications should, subject to New Zealand Post, work themselves through, but we have had an issue today. So I wanted to address that and share that with you, that we are finding little things and we are dealing with them, but what we haven't seen is the sorts of things that you see in the newspapers and on the TV, like NovaPay and those sorts of things, where systems just aren't fundamentally working and delivering. There are teething problems. There's been 2 product bugs which the vendor has fixed, and the team are actively working through all those other issues. And so we are confident going forward that they'll continue to reduce, and then with the investment path ahead of us with regards to what we want to do, we will see even more benefits realised, and in particular around online, the ability for people to do business online. That was a long way of answering your question. My apologies.
No.
But I did answer it, so thank you.
Yeah, but no, useful context, Thomas, because implementing an ERP system is a huge job. So compliments to you guys and your team in terms of doing that. And there will always be some issues, so it's a matter of just dealing with them. Do I have any other questions? Councillor Barker?
Yes, Mr Chair, just with regards to the move to the cloud in 25-26, can you just tell us the whys and what's different from actually what we're doing now?
Yes, so this is a bit of a commercial discussion, I guess, with our vendor. They've asked that we move into the cloud. They prefer all their customers to be in the cloud, even though we're an on-premise client, and we do need to have a commercial discussion with them. We see benefits of being in the cloud. But with regards to the timing and the investment and how that works, we need to have a bit of a discussion with our vendors on that. So we are the first New Zealand council live on their product. All the others that are falling behind us predominantly are all customers from their legacy system to their new, and they're all going on the cloud. And from their perspective, it's easier for them to support customers in the cloud. And for us, I think there's an element of accessibility, ease of use, protection with regards to online storage mechanisms and all those sorts of things, but we do have to have a discussion with our vendor. What we are signalling to you is that we are under pressure to move. We recognise the benefits of doing that into the future, and we need to work with the vendor on the best way of doing that.
The supplementary question is, there will obviously be a cost involved with that process?
And yes, and that is the discussion we need to have with them, yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question? Yep. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. Is this the question? You said watchdog, Infracore and smart environmental. Is that the watchdog as in the dog control, not the watchdog as in the security?
Yeah.
Sorry, which one?
Watchdog Security do our after-hours service with regards to our call centre, and so those portals allow them to access our systems with regards to the services they provide for our after-hours service.
Can I ask one more question then, just something because we were discussing today around community safety. Do we log through our guardians or through the watchdog that are currently on the street incidences of intervention or violence that are reported or managed?
Sorry, Mr Chair. Watchdog provides services during the day for our animal control and safeguardings, but they also provide, as Thomas said, our after hours, and they log both during the day and after our service.
And so our city guardians, do they?
They do have access as well and can do so, yes.
So I think, Mr Chair, my question was just really, can we use this to interrogate the data and get some more information to provide us with details around where the number of incidences are actually happening around town and the hotspots in terms of crime?
Yeah, so yes, and that was one of the benefits we've talked about, is actually having one version of the truth, more up-to-date information. So we currently have a team level that's working full-time on improving reporting and creating of new dashboards and those sorts of elements for the business. And so therefore that sort of information as we capture more of it now, we'll be able to be reported more in a timely and more accurate manner.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A question online, Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not necessarily related to the system change, but I just wondered whether Thomas would like to give us some assurance around data loss or data theft from the system. There's been a few councils around the country that have lost data.
Certainly. So cyber security is important to us. I think it was a year and a half or 2 years ago, we actually did an exercise with a third party that did penetration testing on our network, and in particular did an exercise as well with regards to impersonation and those sorts of aspects of it. And from that, there are a number of enhancements that we've put in place. We haven't done another one recently, but we have I think about a year ago we did present to the previous committee with regards to the mechanisms that we have in place, and we're more than happy to go through that and redo that. With regards to doing another round of penetration testing and those sorts of aspects, that's something that we can look at going forward. For us, I think one of the biggest risks to our data is probably USB sticks. It is the main issue that caused the Waikato DHB's problem. And so what we are looking at now with our new enterprise content management system, and we've rolled out in particular Teams and OneDrive in particular, we will shortly be looking at disabling USB access to our network, which therefore removes what's probably one of the higher risks to our data at the moment.
Thanks, Thomas. Does that answer your question? Yeah, no, thank you. And cyber risk is one of the deep dives we're going to do in our work plan, so we'll come back and have probably quite a detailed conversation on that in a future meeting. Do I have any other questions? Councillor Laurie?
Just a quick one. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. Just on the cloud corridor, what were you saying? We're having discussions. You're going to have discussions with our supplier or what service provider. Is that because it's better for them or it's better for us?
I think sometimes there's some topics that might be better off talked in another forum, and I'm happy to walk you through that.
Councillor, if you're happy with that, that's something that we'll come back at an appropriate time, probably have a good conversation around the commercial analysis of that. Yep. Okay. Cool. Okay. If there's no other questions, then we'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that the committee notes the Phase 2 One Council update and roadmap. Do I have a mover? Councillor Waru, and a seconder? Councillor Kaifong. All those in favour? Aye. We'll take that as confirmed. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Suzanne, and well done. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you at the next meeting with a post-implementation report. Yeah, cool. Okay, next item is the risk review report. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder that we receive the risk review report? Councillor Fong, Councillor Barker, all those in favour, say aye. Aye, we'll take that as confirmed. Welcome, Elron. Do you have a presentation for us? And I'll try not to interrupt during the presentation and behave myself and wait to the end, so apologies.
That's right. For those that haven't met Elron before, Elron McCarthy has been for us for a couple of years now, and he is the manager of our project management office, and also part of that portfolio is looking after the enterprise risk function. So with that, happy to have a hand over to Elron.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Yes, thank you very much, Thomas. Through you, Chair, I've submitted a report that we'll take as read. I just wanted to go through just some of the key points of the report. What I will do is, because we move through the different types of risks that we look at in different categories, so at the end of each slide I'll provide an opportunity to ask any questions. So, overall, we've done a little bit of a clean-up on our systems and processes that we discussed in a previous workshop. What we've done is we've gone from a static process for reviewing the data sets to a more dynamic one. And the snapshot that you see there is a snapshot from our enterprise risk management system. Overall, this period, we've had a reduction. We've closed 17 risks from the previous report. Although the committee hasn't sat, the previous report was run in the previous quarter. The 17 risks that have been closed, the majority of them actually relate to COVID-related risks that we've closed out now. And there are also some operational risks that should have actually sat down in the business unit area that we've cleaned up. As a result of the mitigations, if you look at the table in the top left, you'll see there were some extreme risks at the top. There were 10 extreme risks. Those have now been reduced to 0 post-mitigation, so that's the type of thing that we want to see through our mitigation process. So in terms of our risk profile, this kind of shows it a little bit better. What we want to see is our staff work hard to identify the core enterprise risks, the risks that are impacting the entire organisation, and they work hard to actually reduce those. The type of profile that you see up there is what we want to see. So if we take extreme risk, by example, what does that break down into? So those risks haven't been fully eliminated, but they've been reduced to high and medium risk that are far more manageable. For a lot of these risks, we will never fully be able to eliminate them. Some of the undertakings of council just are high risk by their nature. Things like community safety, infrastructure, geothermal, and then certain strategic risks. So that's how we're breaking down. We work continually with the business to try to identify additional mitigations, and as activities actually come in and out of the council's remit, the profile also changes. Are there any questions just on the risk profile?
No questions. Carry on, Aaron. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm not sure if... Okay, yours is a lot more clearer. What I wanted to actually demonstrate was how the business moves from the raw risk to the residual risk profile. And that's through the implementation of action plans. So the bulk of the action plans are complete. There are 145. I just want to draw your attention to the 30 that are in progress. The fact that they're in progress doesn't mean that we haven't actually achieved the residual risk score. It just means that some of the actions nested within those will be perpetually in progress. So by example, the support provided by the PMO is a continual action, and we target as in progress rather than complete because it needs to be responsive to business needs. Of the 4 action plans that were not started, and that was as of producing this report, all of those action plans are actually now in progress as of the past week. The reason that you'll sometimes see items on the dashboards as not started is because either the time at which they were entered into the system and or the resourcing required to fully implement. Also as well, whilst mitigations are still in the planning phase, they're considered not started. If there are not any questions, we'll move on.
Question?
Just a quick one, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for 20 questions today, but carry on. Just wanted to ask a quick question around what did you call it, mitigations, and the timing. Would the one with the Kotahi Council or the One Council program, would that help speed things up?
Through you, Chair. It really does depend on the type of risk that we're doing. So we have different types and categories. One of our categories is actually technology and data, and nested within the risk register there are a number of risks associated with the implementation of One Council and the technology and data in general. And yes, as part of the actual more granular planning process, there will be key deadlines depending on the kind of likelihood and consequence of the risk. I hope that satisfies the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Helen.
Moving on, so our volume of risk, this is something else that I just wanted to point out. It may be self-explanatory, but I felt it was worth actually looking into. So It's worth pointing out that this is the overall volume, so the number of risks identified in each of our outcome areas. We also have a view for each of the 18 business units that are nested within our outcome areas. But what this shows you is just by volume, regardless of whether the risk is extreme right through to very low, where the bulk of the risk sits. And this would be typical of an organisation like council, in that the greatest volume of risk sits within in our largest operational areas. If you take, for example, community wellbeing, organisational enablement and district development, you would expect to see the volume of our risk because there are largest areas, there are areas that work across the business. For example, organisational enablement has a lot of high-risk activity nested within it. Finance, legal and property, HR, project management office, etc. Equally, community wellbeing, as I mentioned earlier, things like the community safety, events, sports and rec. Just because something's high risk doesn't mean it's inherently evil. It's just we need to be aware of the risk associated with those activities, particularly the ones that have a health and safety impact or potentially a negative impact on staff and general public. Are there any questions on?
Just, and it may refer to the previous graph as well, but just in terms of the proposed actions that are put in place, and sorry, this is quite a general question. When those actions are proposed, some of them already I can see would require additional resource or investment. Is that considered when proposing it, or are there things that could be considered within the current resource and scope? So, as an example, if somebody else needed to be recruited, or if, like one of the examples in the Thriving Communities is invest and utilise comprehensive data sets, including infometrics, like that sounds like we need to invest in a whole other system potentially. So I'm just wondering how that's considered when proposed actions are put forward to the Audit and Risk Committee in general.
Absolutely. Through you, Chair. Yes, so when the teams are proposing their mitigations, the first thing that they look at is, do we have the internal resource in order to achieve it? And how much does that reduce the risk by? The more resource you assign to a lot of the risks, the more you could reduce the profile. And then it's really down to the judgment as to say, okay, well, this is a high-risk item, we need to put resource to it. Just using internal risk, we may reduce it to medium. Is that acceptable? Or do we actually, because of the type of risk, so for example, some of the work around, confidence around our data with our key strategic pieces of work, we will then look at that and say, no, actually, we need a greater confidence value, a greater probability or p-value, as we refer to it, and therefore we buy in additional resource to help further mitigate that risk to an acceptable level.
Can I just build on the question from the Mayor? But can we assume that where there's a raw risk and a residual risk has been reduced because of an action plan, that action plan is funded and resourced? So we are assuming that we've reduced the risk and we have the resource to reduce the risk.
Yes, absolutely. So okay. So the residual risk on our register is based on what is resourced.
What is resourced? Okay, cool. Thank you. Any other questions?
And then, just to touch on the typologies. So effectively, each risk within the register is assigned both a category and a type. So you can actually assign a number of categories. Chair, you mentioned earlier that you'll potentially want to look at strategic risk, by example. So we actually capture that information, but that hasn't featured in this presentation because you can attach a number of categories. So what we just focused on was the typology. That's what's been driving a lot of the risk in general. The reason I wanted to pull this slide up was because it demonstrates quite clearly, if you work from the top down, a lot of the risks associated with our delivery are around resourcing. And then as you move down through the typology, you start to see that there are potential risks around capability. if you like, but I would say that they're actually linked. So if you take, for example, there's insufficient resource, not just internally, but within the market, and then that leads on to capability. So some of the mitigations that we've put in that regard are more around actually upskilling our staff or actually working with our vendors to ensure that we are finding new or innovative ways of meeting these challenges. So I suppose, in essence, what I'm pointing out is, although these types sit there as line items, there's a downstream effect. So the fact that insufficient resources is at the top is what we would expect to see, due to not just the lagging impacts of COVID, but obviously other macro influences that are beyond our control, particularly around supply chain and availability of skilled resource.
On the one that's not quite halfway down, inadequate risk and safety management systems, specifically with respect to health and safety. So there are 14 risks which are there because there are, inadequate safety management systems. Are we, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, in terms of assessing that with respect to health and safety, we are doing what we must and need to do as a good employer, or with respect to that?
Yes, Chair. What happens with those is, what we don't do is, once we've mitigated a risk, we don't remove them from the risk profile or the register. We always retain those items on there.
Okay.
Yeah, so we just want to, and as well, it's worth noting that those are 14 risks across all 18 business units in the organisation. So some of them would be duplicated because they've identified the same risk, but they have different treatments. The other matter around that is there may be movement. So, what we track is if all of a sudden the mitigation, we're finding that we're having a higher number of incidents, for example, relating to our health and safety framework, we'd review this and then go back to our mitigations and adjust accordingly.
Okay, so this table comes from the raw risk evaluation, not the residual risk.
No, so the number of risks is the same regardless of whether it's raw or residual.
Yeah.
And so this comes from the total volume of risks across the organisation.
Yeah, but I'm probably
But they are mitigated, sorry.
They are mitigated. So if, in terms of those 14 health and safety ones, if we went back and looked, we would see that there are mitigations in place to address the initial risk assessment.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely,
thank you.
And apologies.
No, that's right. Any other questions available on this? Keep on moving. Oh, no, we have a question? Yep.
Yeah, it sort of follows you on, Mr. Chair. But it's nice to see that the safest bit here is at the Te Aroha Partnership Hoiano. The 14, just to use the example that we've been using here, the 14 items here that we've identified inadequate risk and safety management systems. So as they've been mitigated and been sorted, are you saying that number will change, or
yes? Well, the number
remains on the register.
I'm sorry, through you, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah.
So
just want to get it clear.
So the typology has been identified as part of our risk management framework. So that type exists, and each business unit manager and the DCE will select that as appropriate. So that risk typology will always be there. The numbers for that particular line item are likely to remain the same. Again, it's not signifying that we have a gap in that area. It's just signifying that there's risk around it. So, it's more about providing assurance that we are managing risk based on that type.
Okay, couple. I'm clear now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sarah. If there's no other questions, we'll move on. Yep,
absolutely.
That's it. Cool, great. Thank you for your presentation. So I guess one of the things I probably mentioned as part of the work plan, I'd be really keen for this committee to have visibility of what I'd call the top strategic risks. So that's the top 10, 12 key organisation strategic risks, what they are, so we have a good understanding of what those risks are. As importantly, what the mitigations that are in place, and that we have an ongoing program to pick one or two, a meeting to actually do a deep dive into those, to really understand those. And also coming out of that will be a discussion around our risk appetite in those spaces. So in areas that we have a low risk appetite, i.e. health and safety, we obviously need to be confident that we've really got comprehensive mitigations in place, and that'll vary for different risks across that discussion. So that's something that offline can work with Elrond and Thomas to sort of work on and sort of bring that back on an ongoing basis to this committee. But have an opportunity to catch up on the system prior to this meeting, and the system that Elrond has developed for the organisation is a really impressive system, and it's a matter of how we leverage that in terms of our strategic discussions around this table. Do I have any other questions? Jeff?
Yes, through the chair. Look, if I could just take the opportunity to draw a couple of threads together with regards to the risk report. One of the things that concerns me is that, as you can see from the risk report in terms of type of risk, the organisation operates in a state of pressure in its normal day-to-day function. What happens, of course, is that things don't normally just stay in a day-to-day state. We get weather events come in from left field, we get civil defence emergencies come in from left field, we get requests to do additional work, we get the imposition or agreement to take on new strategies or policies and directions, and we also get the pressure from changes from the environment we operate in, such as changes in central government legislation. All of these are piled into on top of the work that we do as an organisation on a day-to-day basis. Every time something new comes in like that, the thing that is not readily evident, which I really want to just draw to your attention, is that we already have a risk of failure that have been identified in some of our areas. As we add in more work or more pressure into the organisation, that risk of failure effectively escalates, because we're having invariably to withdraw resource from some areas to apply it to other areas where it's actually needed. And I think that's something that, particularly for new elected members, it's important to actually be very aware of, that the organisation doesn't have a lot of spare people or spare funding sitting, waiting, ready to do additional work. Effectively what we do and continually do is to look at trying to apply people, trying to apply funding from one area to another to offset demand and to offset pressure. And of course when we do that, it invariably pushes into this risk area and increases our potential delivery failure in others where we've taken resource away. Hopefully that makes sense, but it's important from my perspective that that's something that's considered when we're having discussions within committees, for example, about work being requested to be extended into areas where we haven't potentially done something, because those are the sort of things that really start eroding into our ability to keep on doing everything that we're doing and minimising risk at the same time.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can I just ask you something as well as on the Taki? Are you, or it might be whoever can answer this, just what you were talking about there, is that why the biggest risk here is the insufficient resources? So it's not just, that's human resources, that's financial resources, that's across the board. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, if there's no other questions, hey, thanks, Elron, for your report. We'll look forward to seeing you at future meetings. In that respect, can I ask for a mover and seconder to the motion that the committee notes the content of the report and endorses the risk management process? Do I have a mover? Councillor Waira, and a seconder, Mayor Tapsell. All those in favour? Aye. Please say aye. Thank you. The only other item is approving the confidential minutes of the meeting of 27 July. We don't necessarily need to move into public if that's just a straight approval process. So it's moved by Councillor Waira, seconded by Mayor Tapsell. All those in favour say aye. Aye. That's confirmed, and I think that means we've finished the meeting. Oh, my apologies. A closing karakia from Councillor Barker. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Kia whakairia ti tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuku whakataha ai, kia turuku whakataha ai, haunye, hue, tai kie.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, councillors and staff.